Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make this braided wirework bracelet, and it looks like this here, and then I've added beads to it as well. So we have two strands in the braid where we have double wires, and then one strand where it's a single wire, and it's that single wire that we add the beads to throughout to get that really nice effect. You can almost follow the path along. So these are just the materials that I've used, but you could also use different materials than this. Say a thinner wire, this is a 1mm, you could also use a 0.8mm, that's completely up to you and the look that you want. But if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are then the materials that we're going to be using. First of all, we need the wire. In this case, I'm using a 1mm gauge, so it's quite a thick one, but I want to use it because I want it to be quite sturdy, the bracelet that I'm making. You could also use a 0.8mm, but that's completely up to you. And what gauge you use could also depend on the beads as well. So for instance, if you have some beads that you want to use, but you can't get the 1mm wire through them, but you can get a 0.8mm wire through in the holes, then you can just use a 0.8mm instead. And then the beads that I'm using in this case here, these two different ones. The first ones are some 4mm rounds, and these are just purple quartz gemstone beads. And then here I have 4mm bicones, just in a crystal AB. So that's just a combination of beads that I'm using. You can really choose whatever beads that you want to. And then I'm just going to be using these findings here to finish it off with. So my lost or claw clasp, extended chain, and my jump rings to attach it together. Because I'm using the wire to make loops to attach them with, but you can really use whatever kind of clasp that you want to. So let's get the materials together and let's get started. So then what I have here is 5 lengths of our wire, about 40 centimeters each. So these are all we're going to be using for the braid. So then what I've done is I've taken all the lengths here and I put some electrical tape around them, making sure they're lying flat next to each other. And I've also made sure that there's some tails. It's just so we can use them at the end to finish off the piece with. So maybe about 10 centimeters or so. So then put my tape here, and then we're going to start braiding with these longer lengths. So I just want to separate out my wires. So I'm going to be working with them in groups. So I'm going to take the 2 left ones, just separate them out a bit here. Even though we have that tape on, make sure you don't pull on the wires downwards or push them up too much, because they can pull through the tape, so just be a bit careful, at least with the first few stitches, because once we have the braid going it gets much easier. And then I'm separating out the 2 right ones as well, so that's what it looks like there. So we have the single one in the middle, and then basically what this is going to be a regular 3-strand braid. So we're just working with them in groups. Obviously the middle one here only has 1 length, but the other ones we're working with the 2 lengths in that group as if they were 1, just obviously making sure we pay attention to it. So to start out the braid, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to start from my right side. It doesn't really matter what you start from, but I'm going to take the right group with the 2, and I want to start putting a bit of a curve. I like to use my fingers, kind of hold it up here, bring it in towards the middle, over that middle single wire. That's then going to be coming further out to the side. So it's right at the beginning here, can be a little bit fiddly, but once we get the braid going it does get much easier. So that group with the 2 wires here now is the new middle one, and that single one is now moved out to the side. So that's what it looks like. So just kind of get your wires in place, and then until we get the rhythm going as well. So now we need to take the left group and bring that in towards the middle. And don't worry too much about the first stitch or 2, because they can be the most messy, you could say, until we find that rhythm going. So bring that over now and in towards the middle, making sure you put that curve into it. So we have that single one going out towards the right side. And also whenever I work with wire to make a braid, whenever I move it I always like to run my fingers over it to make sure to smooth it out as we go. But obviously in the beginning here, making sure I don't pull it through the tape. So that's now in towards the middle. And then what I'm going to do is bring the single one here over and in towards the middle, because that's the next stitch that we're going to do in the braid. So you just take that. I like to put my fingers on the bottom and the top of it, so it kind of keeps a nice curve, and bring that into the middle then. Now like I said, it can be a bit fiddly in the beginning, but just do the best you can until we then get a rhythm going. So bring that over and into the middle. And then we're slowly starting to see a braid forming. So there we go. So then now what we want to do is add in our first bead. So I'm going to take it here, and then I need to add it onto that single wire that we have in the middle. So before we move on to the next stitch, we need to add the bead. So add it onto the end here and then push it all the way up the wire. Just like that. So it comes all the way up to where we're creating the braid, sorry. It's going to sit, push it as far up as it'll go. Need to push it a bit here. So basically sit right in that corner, you could say. So we then have that in place, and I then need to move on to the next stitch, and that's taking the left group over and in towards the middle. Just make sure everything is smoothed out. But because obviously we're working with the two as one in that same group, we just want to make sure that they stay lying flat next to each other. So I'm bringing them over, and then I also like to hold my fingers on the work that I previously done to kind of make sure that it doesn't go out of shape. And then move it into the middle, making sure that they lie flat next to each other and they stay that way. And then that traps that bead in place just nicely. So keep an eye on it throughout, and if these groups will have two wires ever start crossing over each other, then make sure you kind of catch it as we're making the braid, rather than make the braid and then we find it later on, but then it's a bit too late to do anything about it. So then we're at this point here, and then I'm going to bring the right group over in towards the middle. So it's just a regular 3-strand braid, again making sure that these lie flat next to each other, and then that foley basically cages in that bead now as well. And making sure we get that curve in. So that's the new middle length. And then we need to bring the single one into the middle again. So you could either just do that and have those beads running in the middle, or you could then also add these beads to the edge. So this is where I'm going to add my 4mm bicone, just to add that bling on the edge, but obviously you can add whatever beads you want to. And again, I'm going to add that onto my single length of wire, push that all the way up. It's going to sit on the outer corner just like that. And then we just take the next stitch, making sure that that bead stays there, and then we bring that over and in towards the middle, and then that cages that bead in place right on that outer edge, and it kind of just fills in that space just nicely. Now, like I said, make sure you kind of look at your braid throughout as we go, and if there's anything you want to adjust, rather do it while we're there before moving on too far, and then we can't really adjust it further back in the braid. And that's now into the middle. So then for the next stitch, we're basically going to be repeating what we did up there, and that is adding another 4mm to the center one, the single one. So I'm just going to take the next one there and then bring that all the way up the wire again to sit in the middle. So it's going to sit the same place as up there, except now the wire is just going in the opposite direction towards the other side, but that doesn't make any difference. And then we need to take the next stitch here, make sure everything is sitting properly. It's the right one now because I just took from the left side, and that's the one with 2 lengths in. So I'm going to put my fingers on them to make sure it gets a nice curve around that bead there, and bring that over the single one and into the middle. So there we go. So we're bringing that into the middle there. Make sure to smooth out the wires and just adjust everything until they're in the right position. So something like that, and then again we then need to take the left group and bring that into the middle to kind of fully cage in that middle bead now. So cross that in and over, and then that's the new middle one. So it looks like that, and then that bead is fully caged in. So there we go. So now we're at the point where again we need to move that single wire, but basically every time we move that we want to add a bead as well. So for now we're on the outer edge, so I'm going to add that outer bicone bead again, And I then bring that all the way up to sit in that outer corner before I then bring the wire over and in towards the middle. Just like that. Fit in that slot, that gap on the edge just perfectly. Especially obviously the bicone fits in there nicely because you have that little corner anyway. But obviously you can use whatever beads you want to. And now we have the single wire back in the middle again. So now we need to add the next middle bead, in this case the purple ones. So that's really how you want to keep going now. Every time the single wire is in the middle, you want to add the middle bead and then do your movements. And then every time we move it from the outside edge to the middle, we want to remember to add those side beads as well. So just keep going like this until you have the full length that you need. So then I continued braiding, and this is then what it looks like. So you can see it's a simple braid where we're just adding beads, but you get a really nice effect by using that single strand of wire, and then it kind of being surrounded by the double strands, you could say. So here in the end we just have to finish off this end, and the same with the other one as well. So what we need to do basically is finish off some of the wires, but then also make a loop here so we can attach a clasp. So first of all, what I've ended up with is the single wire in the middle. So make sure to do that and have it coming across as if we were going to continue. But then here, the double wires that are coming right underneath that, what I'm going to do is bring that back around all the way, and then also continue wrapping it around basically. So we're just wrapping those double wires around that single wire. Just about one time is plenty. And then I like to just take my chain nose or flat nose and help squeeze it a little bit to get it as tight around that single wire as possible. So something like that. There you go, you can see we're wrapping around. Then I want to cut off the excess of these. So I'm going to go in with my wire cutters and cut off the excess close to where they're coming out from. And then what you'll always find is you'll have your ends sticking out a little bit, so make sure you take your chain nose again or flat nose and squeeze them down so they're not going to be able to catch or scratch at anything until you're happy with it. You can't feel it with your fingers. And then I'm just going to take my chain nose pliers here, because what we then need to do is get this wire repositioned. So the single one right now is kind of going out to the side, so what I'm going to do is right where it's coming out from those wraps, I want to just grab it and then kind of bend it, give it an angle, so it's going to end up going straight up, continued from the bracelet basically, because I'm going to use this single wire to then make a loop that we can attach a clasp to. So having come straight up, and then we have the other two wires left. So what I'm going to do with them is they're coming underneath the previous overlapping point. So what I want to make sure to do is bring them around and then go over the top of the single wire. So just like that, kind of almost as if we continue the braid. But then what we want to do is start wrapping these around as well, that single wire, to be able to finish them off in the exact same way. So just wrap them around here. Again, I'm going to just flatten them down a little bit before I cut them off. So make sure that they're wrapping around nicely. And then take my wire cutters and cut off the excess. Making sure to only cut them, obviously. Make sure to squeeze them down. So there we go. Once you then squeeze the ends down, then all we're left with now is that single wire that we can then use to make a loop with. So to do that, that's just a simple wrapped loop that we're going to be doing. I'm going to take my chain nose pliers again, or flat nose, put the bracelet towards the side, and then place them just a little bit above those wraps so we have a bit of bare wire showing, and then put a bend into it. I'm bending it away from myself here. And then I'm going to take my 6-step bell making pliers, just so I know I'll get the size loop that I want. Place that in. and then start wrapping the wire here around the pliers all the way, so we get a full circle, something like that. And then I take my chain nose again, grab hold of that circle, and then start wrapping this tail around the bare wire below the circle. Basically that little gap that we left, we're filling that in until we reach the wraps down below. Just so it becomes all seamless. Just like that. And then cut off the excess. And then of course, like the other times, make sure you squeeze in that very end, so you can't feel it or anything. So that's then how I finish off the ends. Just making these little loops, because then I'm going to be attaching some separate clasps to it. You could also use the ends to actually make a clasp that then connects with the bracelet. That's completely up to you, but this is what I'm going to be doing. So you can then obviously attach whatever clasp that you want to, and then we just have to shape the bracelet. So then to shape it here, what you want to do is you can either bend this around something that has the size and shape you want it to be, or you can start using your hands. So just gently go from one place. Don't make a big bend in one place. It's going to put it out of shape. But just gradually move your way across. You can see I'm getting more and more of a curve into it. And kind of go from side to side doing that. So we end up with, in my opinion, prefer an oval shape, because I feel like that sits better on the wrist. We just do that until the two ends meet, until we end up with something a bit like this. So you have a nice shape there, and then you have the braid going all the way around, and then those beads just add a bit of a nice touch to them as well. So you can almost see the path follow it, obviously, but then you have the beads in the middle, and then those little extra ones on the edges, if you choose to add them. So that's what it looks like. So it gives a really nice look on the wrist as well, but also nice and comfortable to wear, and a pretty easy and simple one to do. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.